One of the reasons why this review is late is because I wanted to see how the game held up after more than just the first few days of playing it. Another reason is because I've been suffering from the first world problem of too many games to play. But besides that, it's been about 3 weeks now since the release of Zenless Zone Zero, and I think now is the right time to put out some collected thoughts about this newest game from Hoyoverse. I'll jump right into it and say, I don't hate this game. I know there's been a lot of negative reviews about Zenless Zone Zero floating around out there, and many people are just generally dissatisfied with this game, and I've heard that Zenless Zone Zero has been having issues being able to be played on certain mobile devices. I wouldn't know much of the details about mobile issues because I play this game on PlayStation 5, and it is more than capable of running this game without any problems. If there is issues with mobile performance, then it is on Hoyoverse to get out there and solve those problems. So let's get into the major aspects of this game and how they fare from what we've seen before of this genre.
No restrictions! Fire at will! Ha!
The combat in Zenless Zone Zero feels satisfying to execute. The flow of it feels nice to pull off, and I personally don't mind the character swapping mechanic. Parrying, dodging, and executing time moves all feels fluid, and I expected as much from a Hoyoverse game. Now, is it the most difficult combat in gaming? Of course not, but I really struggle and wonder why people are so adamant on wanting their gacha anime action games to be the next Souls-like or Sekiro doppelganger. If you're so determined to get the most nail-biting combat experience out of a video game, I think you might be searching for it in the wrong genre. Souls-like games already exist, and there's plenty of them for you to play. With that being said, I've heard the difficulty ramps up significantly in later modes of Zenless Zone Zero, which I haven't been able to reach yet as I've only just recently attained Internaut level 42, and some fights within the Hollow Zero have ramped up in difficulty, but we'll talk about Hollow Zero later on. I'm not saying this combat is the most mind-blowing thing ever, but it's not terrible, and I would say it's above average. It feels fun to play, there's a lot of feedback and hit connection, and the characters play differently enough to keep you engaged in wanting to try out more than just a handful of them. I will say that I think focusing on only playing a few characters might get a bit stale after a while. That's why I'm personally going to be building up most of the characters I obtain, to try and keep the variety up when I tackle different missions. Although some characters like Grace just feel pretty boring in their playstyle. The game gave me Grace and I built her for an electric team, but man, is she really boring to play. And while I did get the Shark Girl, and I think she's much more fun of a character than Grace, I've been playing Ellen way too much, and I just want to play someone else for a change. So characters can get a little stale to play, and I personally suggest building up multiple characters and trying them all out, so you can have a variety of different playstyles to focus on as you tackle missions in the game. Again, this is just a suggestion, of course, but it's what I'll be doing as I continue my Zenless Zone Zero playthrough. One last thing is that this game feels nice on controller, and I go as far as saying that I think they really had controller in mind when creating this game.
Manager! Perfect! There's something I wanted your help with. I'm thinking of switching lubricant brands. Should I go for a thinner one or a thicker one?
I'm sorry. What did you just say?
I don't want to go too much into the details of the story in Zenless Zone Zero, but I will say this, the story is ridiculous. And when I mean ridiculous, I mean there's pretty much no character that takes themselves seriously. And honestly, I like this approach. It fits the game's animation style, and there's no real stakes involved. There's only a slight hint at an overarching plot, but for right now, it's a very episodic feeling you get from the game as you move through to take on jobs for different factions you encounter. I have paid attention to about 90% of the game's story. I've listened to every voiced cutscene, and I've read every unvoiced dialogue. The only thing I haven't really read is the phone posts, because they get really long and I don't think it's necessary to read all these random NPCs' individual comments online. The humor in Zenless Zone Zero, I will say it right now, it's funnier than any attempt at humor in Honkai Star Rail. The jokes, while they don't always land, none of them feel forced, and characters are just so ridiculous that at some moments, I couldn't help but laugh at the crazy interactions these characters have with each other. Will you be missing much if you skip this story? Probably not. But just remember, if you're going to pay attention to the story, be ready for a wacky narrative, as it's pretty much the most comedic game that Hoyoverse has put out. Whether or not that comedy lands for you is up in the air. For me personally, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. As for the setting, I really like this Tokyo cityscape atmosphere. It's just something I personally enjoy, which is why I'll be trying out that new Neverness to Everness game that was just shown off by Hada Studio. Not to get sidetracked though, we've all known that Zenless Zone Zero has the most unique looking NPCs maybe in any game I've seen yet. They all fit well, including the shop NPCs, especially that coffee guy, kinda looking like if Home Depot had its own coffee chain. Oh, and if you don't like coffee, that's too bad, because you're going to drink your coffee every single day. So drink your coffee. Now the game world itself is kinda small, and there's one question that could be brought up. Is the game claustrophobic? A little bit, I guess, but this isn't an open world game, and it's not trying to be. The areas that we have are all full of detail and have a comfy atmosphere, which I think suits the game well with it not feeling too small to roam around in. And most of the time, you're just roaming around to get to where you have to go. Throughout all these areas is a really catchy soundtrack, and this music is a different vibe from what Hoyoverse has done before, and I think it works really well. There's not much more to say about the music. I think taste in music is a very personal thing, so if you like these type of lo-fi beats, then you'll be satisfied with this game's soundtrack.
Yeah, the shining golden side. Let your inner spark ignite. Find a treasure, a growing bright. Reach out for it and take a flight.
Alright, let's talk about endgame. Shuyu Defense is your typical Spiral Abyss or Memory of Chaos equivalent. There's not much to be said about this mode. It plays exactly how you think it does, and thankfully there's no TV mechanic to interact with here. Hollow Zero, on the other hand, is really what we need to talk about. Hollow Zero is essentially the simulated universe of Zenless. It takes way too long to complete, and you have to complete so many of them each week to get the full amount of rewards. The buffs in Hollow Zero are kind of interesting, but they still aren't amazing, and eventually you start seeing them repeated a lot. I'd say the buffs aren't the real issue though. What's the real issue is how long the TV mode drags out in Hollow Zero, which will be a good segue into some of the issues I have with this game. At first, I didn't hate the TVs that much, but after playing for 3 weeks now, I really am starting to get disinterested in the TV mechanic, and I really hope they continue to tone it down as the game moves forward. TVs are the biggest issue with this game, and I suspect it will turn players away from this game in the long run, especially if they don't have a committed focus on toning down these TV segments. A few other issues I have with Zenless is I think a lot of the side stuff around the various city locations isn't that interesting to go around and complete. And the 2 arcade games we have, they're just boring. I'm sorry, but Snake is a game from multiple decades ago. And Snake was never that interesting in my opinion, but maybe that's just me. Zenless Zone Zero is kind of what I expected it to be. It's a well-polished and highly detailed game in regards to animations, character design, and world building. The game doesn't differ that much in regards to other Hoyo titles when it comes to the gacha system, but as for the core game itself, I think it's enjoyable enough to sink yourself into and at least give it a try. The upcoming patches of the game will determine the future of Zenless Zone Zero. As for the recording of this video, the devs just released some patch notes. It looks like they're going to add a lot of quality of life to the upcoming future patches, so things are looking pretty good. But I suspect it's going to be run-of-the-mill for a Hoyoverse title. A new section of the city will open up, we'll get limited time events and new enemies, etc. And hopefully they tone down the amount of TVs and how many times we have to do Hollow Zero every week. After playing Zenless Zone Zero for 3 weeks straight now, the 2 games I like the most from Hoyoverse are non-Honkai titles. And maybe that's a controversial thing in some people's eyes, but I won't go there today. I'll continue to play Zenless Zone Zero at least until Neverness to Everness is on the horizon, but I don't see myself dropping a lot of money on this game. I will obtain Zhu and then I'm pretty much not going to be rolling for anyone until my current roster is leveled up. Zenless Zone Zero is a fun game. There's nothing revolutionary about it, but I don't think every game has to revolutionize a genre for it to be enjoyable. If I have to give it a score, I'll give it a Bang Boo out of 10. Seriously, these little guys are cute, and I want a Bang Boo plushie. Now, what should my signature be? Neverness to Everness waiting room? No, that's a bit lame. Nicole's chest mole. That's a little bit too much. Zenless Zone 0. Zenless Zone 0. I've got it. Friendless Lone Hero. Perfect.